Hello, everybody out there. It's my very first live stream all by myself. Can you guys hear me okay? I see you all in the chat. Thank you so much for coming and waiting for me while I got everything together. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me and everything is fine, and we will get rolling. And yes, I do have a Dono chat link pinned to the top. So one quick second. All right, so you guys are saying you can hear me, everything's good? Yes? All right. So today is going to be probably the most highly requested thing that everyone's always asking me for, that I get tons of DMs and emails about, which is, please help me figure out homeschooling, help me figure out how to start, help me figure out what to do. We're interested, we want to, but we're confused. We don't know how to start. There's just so many options now, which when I first started homeschooling like 10 years ago, it was kind of the opposite. It was harder to find things and there weren't very many options. But if you guys see in the description, I have linked to an article I wrote for Gab news blog that is kind of a get started with homeschooling resource as well. That's kind of what I went on Tucker Carlson for and what started all the homeschool stuff for me. So if you guys want to click on the link and save that article, it does have like some of what we're going to talk about today, and it has some links and some resources in there. So that might be helpful after the broadcast, to go check that out or share it with friends or other people who are interested in homeschooling. But for today, I thought we'll start out with a little brief history of public education. So I think everybody who's probably watching me already feels like the public school system right now is pretty bad, right? There's a lot of problems with it. There's rampant violence. It's very hard to even scroll through any social media feed on any given day and not see some viral video of some kid getting the absolute crap beat out of them in a public school, or, assaults, or, other worse things that we probably shouldn't say on YouTube that happen in public schools all the time. That's not even getting into the things that they're teaching, the ideology, the like CRT stuff and the Skittles stuff and all those kind of things that are being pushed in school. Like Libs of TikTok has done a really good job of exposing what a lot of teachers are trying to teach these days. So we kind of know a lot of the reasons why public school doesn't look so good to us and why we're looking for something else. But maybe we don't know that even though the school systems are really terrible now, and maybe worse than it was for us in the 80s, 90s, growing up, that the origins of the public school system, number one, are not very old. It's only about 130, 140 years old. Prior to that, for all of human history, everybody either learned at home, or we had like private tutorings or private schools or different things that maybe certain people would go and get educated. But most kids, if they learned how to read, they learned at home. They may have learned in communities or things like that. But the compulsory public school system that was paid for by taxes is only about 130, 140 years old. And it was started by somebody named Horace Mann. Great name, right? Horace Mann. He was a very diehard SJW progressive for his age in the 1800s, and he created the first board of education in Massachusetts. And his idea for compulsory public education came from the Prussian system. And the Prussian system at that time was addressing problems that the Prussian Empire was having after the Napoleonic Wars, where they needed a population that was going to be submissive to authority, be militaristic, run on like a military type of a schedule. And also they needed people, this is the Industrial Revolution, right? So they needed people in factories who were going to be reliable workers, who would show up on time and follow a schedule and follow steps, right? So when Horace Mann traveled to Europe and saw the Prussian system, he thought this would be perfect, although he had his own little spin on why he thought it would be perfect. And when he came back to the United States, he got a few friends and colleagues, including Elizabeth Peabody, who I believe was his wife's sister, I want to say. Um, and they were kind of part of this transcendentalist circle of intellectuals in Boston. And they had what we would consider to be prototypical New Age transhumanist beliefs. So their worldview was that humanity is on this path where we're going to transcend our current state and we are going to have peace on earth and bring utopia. They were socialist, and they thought that we needed to have things like gender equality and social equality in order for humanity to reach this utopian end that they were hoping to bring about. And their whole purpose for public school was that they thought if we can get children into public school and out of their home, we can unlearn all of the what we would consider undesirable teachings that they're learning at home. Maybe some, Christian stuff that we don't agree with, or some conservative things, or some family-oriented things we don't agree with. We can unlearn all of that, and we can indoctrinate every child with the same view, a view of like a socialist, transcendentalist, globalist worldview, where we all think the same, we are all on the same page, we all agree with each other, and there's basically one worldview that is taught as correct, and everything else is deviant, everything else is counter to what we're trying to do. And the reason they wanted to do this is they thought they could bring about world peace and an end to war. If we all think the same, if we're all conditioned the same, if we're all taught the same, we could make everybody little carbon copies, and this will create peace, right? This will create the type of public that is going to be very subservient, very submissive to authority, and they're going to basically take instructions and do what they're told. And this will lessen conflict and create world peace. I know, sounds great, right? So that was the theory behind it. It was never ever about teaching kids. It was never about learning. It was never about aptitude tests or academic performance, really. And at the same time that they fashioned together this public school system that they wanted, they also were filling the universities with academics who would teach this. So they started what is called normal schools. Very weird name. I don't think it should have been normal, but they called them normal schools. And the purpose of normal schools was to train teachers to teach what we want them to be doing, right? And then they filled the universities with academics who followed these same principles. And now we have a giant system of indoctrination that's about 130, 140 years old. And if you talk to older generations, they don't think they were programmed. They don't think they were propagandized, but that's because they tailor the propaganda to fit the times, to fit the goals, and to fit the population that they are trying to indoctrinate. So that's like a super brief overview. Maybe in the future, if people are interested, we'll go over that more in depth. But I think most of you are probably here for like, how the hell do I homeschool my kids, right? So, but that's just there as kind of something to keep in the back of your mind, that if you feel like public school is not what you want for your child, you are on the right track and you have good reasons to think that, right? It's not irrational. You're not some weird person who's got like crazy fundamentalist ideas. You just kind of figured out what the game is. So you're not wrong. You're not crazy. The school systems were always meant to indoctrinate and get people to follow like this transhuman authority of socialist and transhumanist stuff. So craziness. And we've had it for a long time. But public school is the new experiment. So I think one of the worst things you face when you start to think you want to homeschool, right? You decide this, and maybe your spouse is on board, maybe they're not. Maybe you start to talk to your parents or your friends or your relatives and say, hey, I'm thinking I would rather homeschool my kids. I'm really thinking that might be a good thing. I'm sure every one of you who has ever vocalized this opinion has been met with some resistance, right? You've probably had a spouse or a parent or a neighbor or a friend say, homeschool, and then they give you their list of all the things that could go wrong, all the reasons why homeschooling might be bad, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how to deal with the pushback and how to deal with the stigma. I think there is homeschooling is definitely picking up steam. I addressed that in the article that I wrote for Gab that's in the description. It's on the rise, especially since the pandemic, because a lot of people are working from home. A lot of things are remote now, so it's given people more opportunity to homeschool. So I'm hoping we can make it more normal, but probably a lot of you are still going to get met with a lot of pushback. You're going to hear things like, oh, well, what if they're not properly prepared for school? Or what if they don't get properly socialized? Or won't they be weird? Those kind of things. So I want to take, hopefully, if I can figure out the tech here and drop the StreamYard link when we get a little further in, I will drop the StreamYard link. And if you guys want to come on and ask a question or chat, that would be cool. Also, I have a Dono Chat link pinned to the top of the chat. So if you'd like to support my brand new little baby channel and the work that I'm doing, you guys can send me a Dono Chat and I will answer those questions first as we're going to. So the pushback, right? That's why people ask how I got into debating. I think a big part of that was constantly having to defend my life choices to everyone around me, because especially 10 years ago, it was very weird. It was weird not to follow certain CDC schedules as recommended. I would get nasty phone calls from the public school lawyers who would tell me that if I even thought about, trying to fight them on it, that they had powerful lawyers and I was not going to win and things like that. So you get some threats, some coercion. That's really nice. And then you may just get especially if you have older parents, they're probably going to think it's weird. They're probably going to think you're putting your children's future at risk. Well, there's a ton of statistics. There's a ton of data about homeschool kids, and all of it, as far as I'm aware, shows that homeschool kids perform better. They make better employees. They make more money. They get into college earlier. They get into better schools. They do better on standardized tests, which is weird. Standardized testing was kind of developed for public school. You would think that the public school kids would do better, but generally homeschool kids do better. And you will occasionally find people that homeschooling didn't work for, but that's just like anything else. If things aren't good at home, the children struggle in school. That's true whether they're in public school or private school. So if somebody says, oh, well, what if your child struggles academically? Well, that could be the case if they're in public school too. And there could be people who are homeschooling, but they're really not doing anything, right? The typical kind of crummy, lazy parents who probably aren't paying much attention and might have a lot of issues going on. If you know that's not you, if you know you're going to be paying attention, you're going to be fine. So the biggest fear is people will say well, I'm not a teacher. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm equipped to do it. And I'll tell you just a little bit about my philosophy for homeschooling. So we in our house don't have a super strict way that we go about homeschooling. I kind of just evaluate each kid as they're going along through different stages in their development and assess them regularly, and then work on their weaknesses and then find what their strengths are. And then we do what works for each kid. So I've been, my oldest is 22, my youngest is 11. So I've got a good decade into this now. And when they were little and we were just starting out, it's pretty easy because you're just starting with fundamentals. And there's so many programs out there, tons of free programs. You don't have to spend a bunch of money. We didn't spend a bunch of money. And the thing I want to say about the massive amount of choices is that most of them are going to be pretty good. It just depends on you and what you prefer and your kids and what they respond to. And my best advice is don't put a ton of pressure on yourself that you have to find that right away and get everything right at the beginning. You have lots of time. So one thing you should think about is that homeschool should not look like public school. You shouldn't be sitting there for 7 hours a day like you would be in a public school. And it shouldn't take 12 years either. So if you're being efficient with your homeschooling, you should be able to get maybe a few hours. It's going to vary, right? Depending on how many kids you have and what their ages are. You might only do an hour a day if they're little. You might do 2 or 3 hours a day. You might do 3 or 4 hours a day, just depending on what you're doing and what you're studying and how many kids you're working with and what their ages are. That's all okay. So first thing is get the idea out of your mind that there's a proper and correct way to do things. That's not really the case. Just like how each of us makes eggs differently, right? I have my way I like to make eggs, and Moon has her way she likes to make eggs. Lots of different ways to cook eggs. None of them are wrong. It's just preference and what works for you, right? So the first thing is to remember that you're going to be doing this and it has to work for you. So give yourself some time to try different options, explore different things, and you're going to figure out pretty quickly what you like and what you don't like. And so for mine, with 5 of them, the oldest one did more public school than she did homeschool. She did mostly public school because she went straight into trade school, right into high school, which was great for her, worked great for her. And the schools weren't that bad yet. And we did kind of homeschooling on top of public schooling, to be honest. There was a lot of like unteaching her things she was learning incorrectly in public school and things like that. But she just went straight into tech school right in 9th grade. So there wasn't that much to do. And then with each kid after that, we did more and more homeschool to where the youngest ones, that's all they've ever done, pretty much. So what you can do is start out with maybe a program like Khan Academy for your math and your science and your tech stuff. My kids really liked Khan Academy for those things. They have some really fun programs like where kids can learn how to code and build their own video games and things like that. They've got like a community where the kids can share the games they're building with each other. They can make adjustments to each other's games or suggest ways to make the games better and work together, which is really cool. And then they've got, really good math practice, math instructional videos, things like that. A couple of the kids loved that. One of them hated it. She just was like, I hate this. So rather than force her to do that, I did other things with her. She's not super into math, which is okay. This is another thing. You don't have to have every child be a straight A student in every single subject. You want to establish a base first, right? Get them their reading, writing, and arithmetic like we did way back in the day. Make sure they can read, make sure they can write, and make sure that they can do some basic math. Get that stuff out of the way. Those are fundamentals, right? So with her working on her fundamental math, to sit her in front of a screen and have her do that stuff just didn't work for her. So we would do things like get money and count money. We would do things like bake things. And then from the recipe, you're learning how to weigh grams or ounces. You're learning what fractions are, like half a cup. Okay, if we only have a full cup measuring cup, how do we figure out what half a cup is? Things like that. So for her, she was much better with hands-on things that we could demonstrate in the real world. Far more useful to her, way more applicable. So there's no reason if you have multiple kids to make all of them do the exact same thing, if that makes sense. So while the other kids are like, I could just get them set up on Khan Academy, they're working on their math, then kid number 4 can come over here and work on some other things with me where we're, using puzzles or we're using baking or like real world tangible things that help her conceptualize numbers. The other thing I want you to remember when you're starting homeschooling is you don't have to be a genius. You do not have to know everything. You don't have to have all the answers. And I'll tell you a secret. A lot of public school teachers are not super smart. In case you guys didn't notice that when you were in school, there's plenty of them that, they're not geniuses, right? And they're working off of textbooks and programs and modules and things like that. And if there's something you don't know, it's really actually a good thing because that happens to us all the time where my child will ask a question and I will say, I don't know. Let's find that out. And when you don't know something, that's a great opportunity to do what school should really be about, which is teach them how to learn, teach them how to teach themselves, teach them how to think, right? Rather than just indoctrinate and spoon feed information, it's better for you to teach them how to find out something they don't know. That's what learning is. That's what education is. And if you can teach them to do that, they're probably going to like school learning education type of stuff throughout their life because they feel capable. So my number 4 child, I don't want to use their names for obvious reasons because the internet is a very mean, bad place sometimes. So number 4, we shall call her. She was tested as a toddler and found to be on the autism spectrum. I have a lot of thoughts about that and what that's all really about. But she had some speech delays and some issues that we spotted because she was the fourth one. So we already kind of knew, like, there's some things that probably aren't normal that we're a little worried about. So we got her checked out and tested, and they said, yeah, autism spectrum. Now, guys, they gave me this doomer story that she was going to never be past like a 4-year-old development wise, that she was never going to be able to go to normal school. She might not ever be verbal. Just gave us this doomsday scenario that right off the bat I did not believe. I was just like, I don't think you can predict all that from spending one day with her. And I already kind of didn't trust the system. So I was like, we're gonna investigate some things. So we made dietary changes with her. We worked on a bunch of stuff with her. I did a bunch of reading, a bunch of studying, and we just tried things until we found stuff that worked for her. And now she is about to be 14, and she's actually halfway through writing her own first book. She is doing great outside of the system. When we tried to like put her in classes and stuff for kids on the spectrum, it was a disaster. It was an awful, frustrating experience. So I was just like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to just work with her. And I never told her there was something wrong with her. You know what I'm saying? I never said, oh, look, you've got a learning deficit and you're really going to have a hard time. I didn't ever say that. I just told her, yeah, the way you learn is different, but you can learn just like anybody else can learn. There's nothing wrong with you. You just have a special mind that functions a little bit different than like the average, but averages are only averages. So who cares, right? So we just really tried to empower her that, yeah, you can totally do this. You're just going to have to do it your own way. It might not look like how your sister or brother does it. It might not look like how your friend does it, but you're totally capable of learning. And it took her a while, but she, like most people that meet her now, would never know that she had ever gotten a diagnosis like that. Yeah, so I saw somebody in the chat asking about the food changes. We took out grains, all gluten for sure. Gluten and dairy were the two big ones. And then early on, we took out a lot of stuff. Anything that might be autoimmune, inflammatory, or anything like that. So she was eating a lot of meat, some fruit, bone broths, homemade fermented foods and yogurts and stuff like that. And as she's gotten older, she can tolerate more and more things if she like slowly adds them. And she kind of knows, like, this is the cool thing about raising kids at home with you and not having them gone from you all day, is like, we could talk back and forth about what's working and what's not. And we could talk about, because she would even start saying to me at like 8, oh, I feel like I can't think today. Like I feel foggy, like I can't think. I think it might be because I ate something I don't normally eat and my stomach's kind of upset and whatever. So she kind of has started to figure out her own system, and she kind of knows what works for her and what doesn't. And she's a very healthy eater, and she's a really healthy kid. She's like almost never sick, and she's doing great. So again, my advice is, if you get some kind of doomsday diagnosis that your child has ADHD or is on the spectrum, I'm not saying that you shouldn't pay attention to that. I'm just saying, don't listen to, it's like when they tell people they're never going to walk again, and then plenty of people do, right? They say these things because of liability. So just take it with a huge grain of salt, and know that if you work on it with your child and you're able to spend some time, you can figure a lot out on your own. So we had 5 children, all completely different from each other, some with different abilities than other abilities. And so what we did was just kind of take our time, not put a ton of pressure on, and just each day, if you're doing something, you're going to get so much farther than you would ever think. So if you're having a day where everybody's cranky and not feeling it, maybe just keep it real short. Just do something really short and sweet, and then go on to something else. Or maybe you find a fun thing to do that doesn't feel like school, where they're still learning, which is where I would highly recommend, if you can, doing some kind of home gardening. Even if you live in an apartment, you can probably do container gardening, things like that. That kind of stuff kids love. It's really interactive. It makes them feel like they are doing something, like watching a seed grow into a plant and then watching it flower and then watching it create some kind of thing that they can eat is super interesting and fun for kids. It makes them feel like they're in charge. It makes them feel like they are participating. They get excited every day to get up and go look at their plant. And then you have, just from like growing a tomato plant, you can teach children about soil pH, sunlight, seasonal cycles, growing zones, all these crazy things. And if you don't know it, you just go to the library together, you get a gardening book, and you do it together. So the way I approach homeschooling is very like, we're doing life together as a family. And through the process of doing life together, I'm passing down everything I already know. And then if we don't know things, we learn it together with the kids. And I know Moon, who's in the chat, my mod and friend Moon, she will tell you, like, we have gotten a lot smarter through homeschooling our kids. There's all kinds of stuff that we didn't know and wouldn't know had we not been homeschoolers, right, Moon? So like there's, I mean, kids will ask you every question under the sun, and then you have to be like, you know what? I don't know that. Let's find out. Let's look into it. And then while we're looking, we can Google and look up stuff. And then we have a discussion about, how do you know if information is correct, right? Because there's a lot of bad information on the internet. So when we're looking up things, what's a reliable source? What's a primary source? What's a secondary source? What are the differences? How can we be reasonably sure that the information is reliable? Things like that. So we do a lot of, it's kind of a Socratic method where we're just having a lot of discussion, question and answer. We investigate things together. We talk about our methods, right? So that's basically the biggest thing to remember when starting is, don't put a bunch of pressure on yourself. Don't try to, it's kind of like if you're starting an exercise program, don't try to do everything all at once the first day. Don't think that you're going to like, okay, we're going to sit down at 9 a.m. and we're going to do an hour of math and we're going to do an hour of science and then we're going to have lunch and then we're going to try not to do that too much. If your personality and your home is such that more structure is better, have a little more structure. If your home and family is better suited to, yeah, we have some structure, but we also have a lot of flexibility, then do that. Because it's going to be very personal. It's going to be super personal to you, what works for you and what works for your kids. And if you have multiple kids, different things work for different kids. Another big tip. So my son was great at math, loved math, was kind of a math whiz. Probably would have been an engineer, right? He was like super into building and anything that had anything to do with math and engineering, he was just super into, really good at. But he was pretty crummy with language and vocabulary. Pretty typical for a boy, right? And then his sister, he was closest to an age that they were super close, good buddies, and hung out the most. She was great with language and like conceptual stuff. Pretty typical for a girl, right? And like social studies, history, that kind of stuff. She liked that. She was really good at that. So what they would do is he would help her with her math stuff, and then she would help him with his English and reading stuff. And for those two, they got along great. It worked great. Now, if I had tried to make my oldest and him do that, they would have been fighting and choking each other. So that wouldn't work, right? So I kind of, whatever worked, that's what we did. Okay, you two want to help each other? Great, do that. The oldest one wants to do her own thing. Go ahead, go off and do your own thing. The two little ones want to do something more hands-on. Okay, I'll be over here doing something more hands-on with them. And you're going to have some days where you're having a lot of fun and you're in the groove and you might take the whole day and be doing things. You're going to have other days where maybe someone's tired or you guys are sick or whatever, and you just don't have to stress a ton about it. You've got lots of time. You're going to get so much more done in homeschool in a short period of time because you don't have 25 kids in a class. Think of all the time wasted in a public school day with lining kids up, moving them from one place to another, trying to get them to settle down, passing out papers, all the different things, all the different breaks that they have to take and recesses. If you condense down the actual time that kids in a public school are actually doing school work, it's probably 2 or 3 hours anyway. Does that make sense? So don't put a ton of pressure on. Don't be overly rigid to start. I would say take the whole first year and explore. Just give yourself a whole year to explore different curriculums, different methods, how your child responds to different things, what you personally like to do. Because look, if you hate it, you're not going to want to do that for years. So don't pick a program that you're like, oh, I can't stand this program. You're not going to want to do that. It's got to be sustainable. So give yourself like a whole year to find what you like, to test things, to try things, because that's like a necessary part of learning and you're exploring anyway. So that's like my biggest starting advice. And then I would say when kids get older, there's some really cool stuff that you can do. So when you get kids that are junior high, high school age, by the time they get to be 12, 13, 14, you're going to kind of know, right? If you've got a math and engineering kid, you're going to kind of know if you've got, wow, this kid is like really gifted and a superstar in a certain thing. Or you're going to know, okay, this kid's never probably going to go to a 4-year college and earn a degree, but he might want to go to a tech school and like be a diesel mechanic, right? Or like work on that huge, crazy farm equipment. Like you can explore different things with what you think they're going to do. And this is something that they do in Japan and Europe and all these other countries that we don't do in America, which is by the time kids are around 7th, 8th, 9th grade, you kind of know that. So if you have a kid who is not destined for 4 to 8 years at a university, I wouldn't push it. I really wouldn't, especially with how costly college is and things like that. Public school kids are allowed to do the vocational schools and the tech centers. They are also allowed to participate in sports, band, all of those other like clubs and activities that are in a public school because you still pay taxes, right? So if you have a homeschool kid and you're like, but what about sports and what about cheerleading and what about dances and proms and all that stuff? They can still do that in every state I'm aware of. There could be some exception somewhere, but as far as I know, everywhere that I've looked into, they're still allowed to participate. You are still a taxpayer. You are still paying millages. You're still paying all that stuff as a citizen. So your kids can do the school basketball team if they want. They can do cheerleading. They can join band. They can do like the German club or whatever. And once they get to high school, they can do vocational schools. So maybe you have a daughter who like loves doing her doll's hair. And as she's getting older, she's really artistic and she likes people. And you think maybe she'd like to do the cosmetology program at the local tech center. When she gets to high school, you can go enroll her in that. So she'll have her basics done through elementary school and junior high. She goes to tech center, she earns a certificate, and she gets a career without having to start with a bunch of debt. She doesn't have to wait until she's 22 to make a living, and she doesn't have to start with, the average now is $36,000 a year, or $36,000 in debt for a college degree for the average person. So I think it's a really smart thing to do if you can get kids into that vocational vein where they can get career skills and not have to go into a bunch of debt. So that's a big one. If you can get them into tech centers and vocational schools when they're older, definitely do that. They can even do that and then still go on to a university if they want. I know some homeschool kids that I'm acquainted with where one of the sons, he learned diesel engine mechanics at tech school, and he was so good at it that he ended up going to university for some kind of like much higher engineering degree that had to do with agriculture and like giant tractors and combines and stuff, right? So they still have all these options open. Another thing you can take advantage of as homeschool kids is the CLEP program. It's CLEP. And if you go to the Ron Paul homeschool website, there's a ton of information about CLEP. And that is basically a program that allows kids to test out of college classes. So if you've got a pretty smart kid who can probably go to college a little early, have them take some CLEP exams because they might be able to test out of a lot of those College 101 classes and save a lot of money. And then whatever classes they still need, do those at a community college, and then they can probably get a bunch of scholarships to do like a 4-year university or something if that's going to be their path. So don't let people fearmonger you that homeschool kids don't do well in college or can't go to college or won't get into college. In fact, I just talked to Larry Sharp last night. He's a libertarian guy in New York who's run for governor there, and he does a lot of hiring and firing as his real job. And he said that he does like high-end hiring, like corporate jobs, like the higher up corporate jobs. And he said they actually don't want people with degrees. They want people with experience, and they actually look for homeschool kids. Why would employers want homeschool kids? Well, what do you have as a homeschool kid that public school kids don't have? So homeschool kids are going to be much more self-motivated. They're going to be more self-driven. They know how to start a project, follow it through, and finish it without having to have someone hold their hand and walk them through. Public school, remember, is just a big indoctrination machine that teaches them how to follow orders. That's not what we want as employers. We want people that we can say, hey, go do your job and I'll check in on you later, or tell me when your project is finished. And you can be a self-starter. You can go do that without a ton of supervision. So homeschool kids tend to be much better at that because they haven't just been indoctrinated with having to be walked through step by step on anything they're doing and having to have authority tell them before they feel like they can take action on anything. Homeschool kids tend to be self-starters. They're self-motivated. They can teach themselves, right? They're good at training and teaching themselves. So employers love homeschool kids. And like I said, on average, they tend to perform better. They tend to earn more money, all that sort of stuff. So you're actually giving them a huge leg up in life by homeschooling. And my last piece of advice before I get into like super chats and you guys' questions is that I wanted to say the other big thing about homeschooling is like it's a good opportunity for you as a parent if you're going to start to homeschool. Sit down and think about all the things you didn't get to learn in public school. Make a list of all the things you feel like you got failed at, right? That school didn't teach you. So I did this. I sat down and I made a list of all the stuff I thought should have been in school that wasn't in school, that I wish I had been taught before I had to be an adult and go out into the world. And it was things like personal finance, basic budgeting. How does the banking system work? How does the credit system work? All that personal finance piece, I got none of that in public school, and I was not prepared when I went out into the real world, and I got shellacked. So that wasn't fun. And I was like, why the hell don't we teach kids this in public school? So I'd say like personal finance would be a big one. Maybe how taxes work, how income taxes work. When my oldest one who was mostly public school, got her first job and got her first paycheck and saw how much they took in taxes, she was mad, right? She was just like, what? They took like 25% of my paycheck. And we were kind of like, yeah, sucks, huh? And she was like, where does it all go? It was like kind of red pilled her a little bit in some ways because she had to be like, wait, what are they doing with all my money? So maybe teach them about like the tax system, income tax, how much they're going to have to pay. Maybe teach them some things like how much it actually costs to live in the real world. So when I take my kids to the grocery store, we budget. We have a budget and I'm like, we can spend this much. So if you really want the bag of Cheetos, you can pick the bag of Cheetos, but then you're going to have to give up something else or put something else back. That kind of thing, right? They got their own little bank accounts and figured out how to manage them and use them because I'm very anti-banker, anti-central banking, but this is the system we live in, right? That's another theme that I always teach the kids. I don't try to like totally insulate them from the world. I teach them stuff as they're ready for it. And then I try to put it in context of how we live in the world, but we're not of the world and we don't have to be like the world, right? So like people ask me that all the time. Do you let your kids online? Do you let them watch TV? Yes, we do. Obviously, we don't let them watch stuff that's like super inappropriate for their age or anything like that, but we don't super isolate them from things either. It's more like, yeah, they've seen all the Skittles propaganda because it's everywhere. 20 years ago, you could change the channel. You can't change the channel anymore because it's on every channel. That time is gone. It's going to be there. They're going to see it. So we, instead of trying to hide them from it, we taught them about it. So we would like look at the stuff together and then have discussions and talk about it and talk about why we don't necessarily believe what other people believe about it, and just have those conversations so that they can start to think things through and contextualize it and perceive things in a way that we think is good and healthy for them, rather than just trying to shelter them, if that makes sense. So yeah, sit down and make a list of all the ways you were failed in your public school education, and maybe those can be some pillars of what you want to do. If you wish you would have been taught some things about like being self-sustainable or homesteading, maybe you can include some of that. If you struggled with personal finance, you can include some of that. If you can't figure out where anything is on a map, like 90% of public ed kids, maybe that's something you could focus on. Like, I would like my kids to know where China is in relation to, the Middle East or something. So maybe teach them more geography than you learned, that kind of thing. So I think that's a really good starting point. And again, can't stress it enough. It has to be fun. You have to like it. The last thing you want is for your kids to hate learning and associate it with something they hate and think that school is like this awful, torturous experience. I think that's just like a really same thing. You wouldn't want to take your kids to church and have them just hate church, right? So you want a good community where they're learning the right things. Same thing with school. Another great thing that we should probably mention real quick is that now there's tons of homeschool groups, co-ops, all that kind of stuff. We live really far away from everything, so we've only had some limited interaction with those things, but the kids did like swimming lessons, gymnastics, they did cheerleading, they did track, they did tennis, like a lot of stuff like that. So they still had plenty of interaction. They have a youth group at their parish that they're really active in. So they get tons of socialization that way. And anybody who has ever met my kids you will know they have no trouble socializing. They're very extroverted, social, chatty people. They are not scared of people. If anything, I feel like they're far more social than all the other kids that they know who are public school kids, who are just like doom scrolling on their phone and don't want to like talk to real people because it's like terrifying to them for some reason. My kids will just like walk up to kids in the park and be like, do you want to play? Do you want to be friends? Let's hang out. They're like really social. So that's not a problem. Don't let people fearmonger you. And then just come back at them with all the things that's wrong with public schools these days, which there's so much that it's like you'll never run out. So all right, let's take a quick look and see what's going on in the dono chat. All right. Okay, Brooke M sent me $5. She didn't say anything, but thank you so much, Brooke, for your support. I really appreciate it. And then somebody with the name Southern Israelite said you did not address the Christian role in the feminist movement leading up to the women's Christian temperance movement and the connection between Woodhull and Oneida in your interview. Yes, you do have a point. If you read my book, I do go in depth into that. So maybe you mentioned that because you have read the book, but Jay had specific topics he wanted to cover. That's what we talked about, but I do talk about that in the book. And then the last thing this person said was Christianity is feminism. No. That's why in the book I go into great pains to differentiate between Orthodox Christianity and later innovations of Christianity, and that feminism came out of a very specific sect of Christianity. It came from Protestant liberation theology. So no, there's no I wouldn't even say Roman Catholicism is inherently feminist. It after Vatican II, when Catholicism basically got destroyed, yeah. But prior to that, not so much. It was really the temperance movements and all that. Yes, that was seriously tied in with feminism, and it was very matriarchal, and it was very mother hen, and the people who invented the public education system were in that group of people. They were like Christians in name only is what I would say. So that might be a topic for another stream. Let's see. Does anybody have an interest in calling in? I can drop the link if you guys want. I'll just go ahead and do that and see if anybody wants to. in case you don't have to come on camera if you don't want. If you want to just talk without being on the camera, that's fine with me. But let's see. I think there was a bunch of questions in the chat here. Oh, yeah. I guess the Southern Israelite person had a bone to pick with the Christians or something. Did any of your kids go to public school sports or programs? Yes, I did kind of talk about that. So, underwater basket weaving. Yes. All the fabulous degrees people get that don't do anything. Yeah, if I missed questions, I know I was just talking, so feel free to drop them again. If you'd like to support my channel, send me a dono chat at the pinned link at the top of the chat, and I will prioritize those. How many? Chase Haggard, don't give your children Ritalin. All you have to do is go to Twitch and watch all of the leftist progressive Twitch debate guys to find out what happens if you start to learn to depend on Adderall and Ritalin, because they're all wearing fingerless gloves and they're all like little speed demons who talk super, super fast and can't think their way out of a paper bag. What else? What are your thoughts on the classical education movement? I think there's a lot of systems that are good. Like, some people really love Charlotte Mason. Wasn't for us, but I don't think it's inherently bad. I think there's some great stuff about it. Classical education, I think, is great stuff. I mean, we do a lot of, I guess, what you would consider like classical education. We include a lot of like philosophy and like language stuff and what used to be considered fundamentals. That's more what we do. I do very little in the way of like all this stuff that they added, right? All the weird things they've added. Another quick thing I want to mention is there's some new trends in public education that I want you to be wary of and watch out for. One of them is called social emotional learning. This is a super suspicious new trend. It came from China. It's part of the Chinese social credit score system. It was developed specifically to get Chinese citizens into the system. And it's catching some steam here with the lefties and the people who want to psychologize every child to death and want school to be nothing but endless psychological evaluation of kids' emotional problems, which I feel develops emotional problems in kids. If you're constantly focused on feelings and emotions and psychology, you'll go crazy. I'm not saying always ignore that. I'm saying put them in their proper place. But the social emotional learning stuff I would stay away from it. If you have like programs, if your kids are in public school now and they're doing that, or they're making it an option, I would stay away from it. It's very suspicious. The origins of it are very suspicious, and the people who are pushing it are the usual suspects. Let's see. I have somebody here. Hey, Mama. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, wow. Sorry. I've got little ones with me, so don't mind me.
That is fine. Yeah. We don't mind.
Yeah. So my question was, I actually emailed you, but it's just in regards to so when you said that how with the kids, when you said with the kids that how it was very flexible and really free range kind of thing. Did you ever give any exams, or how would you assess them in their learning, so to speak? So how did you determine, when you said that your boy was really good at maths and then your girl was really good at English, what did you do to kind of, basically did they sit any exams, or did they do anything like that?
Yeah, I did do. So we kind of did a typical school year because we live in Michigan. And if you guys know anything about Michigan, we have horrible, brutal, long winters where you don't want to go outside. And then we have short summers. So for the short period of time that it's really fun and nice to be outside, I want them outside. I'm like, get outside, get sunshine, get dirt on you, be outdoors, play, get exercise, right? So I gave them summers off. And then in the fall, I would do an assessment. Most of the time we used Khan Academy's assessment program because it was pretty thorough, pretty accurate, easy to understand, and it wasn't super long. It was shorter testing. So most of the curriculum that you might use, at least partially, will have assessments in there that will help
Okay.
place the kid in the proper point in the program. So we would do it at the beginning of the year and then usually like around the end of the year so that I could show them their progress on certain things, because that's really motivating when they could see like, oh, my vocabulary was down here and now it's like up here. Look how much I've added. You know, those kind of things were really fun for them. So there's tons and tons of programs. If you find any you like, even just to use the assessment like features on there, you can, there's tons of good ones. I do recommend Khan Academy for that. If you guys like it, give it a shot. But yeah, it's a pretty mainstream program that's supposed to put kids on track for college. So it will tell you kind of like, if you want to know where they would compare to public school kids, it will tell you. So there's a lot of programs that will do that, and they usually have assessments built in. I would highly recommend using those once, maybe twice a year, or just if you're thinking maybe they are behind or ahead and you want to know.
My next question is like, so with all of your babies, or like all of your beautiful kids, I was gonna say, did they know any different? Like, did they regret or not like being homeschooled? Like, did they see any kids their same age if they were in social groups? Like, was it ever kind of awkward when they encountered all these kids that would say, like, you know, what school do you go to? And then they'll be like, oh, wait, I'm not at school. And then they would have that, like, so certain kids that they would encounter may not understand or like try to, yeah, I don't know, were they like not ostracized, but kind of like not really? Did they feel, were they happy? Did they feel really like, do they know any different? Were they, you know, do they regret not being in homeschool? I don't even know how to word the question properly, but yeah.
No, I know what you mean. My oldest one, like I said, he did more public school and then just went to vocational school. She liked the structure of like a public school. She's a very type A kid, and she liked that. My second oldest did mostly homeschool, and she has told me that she thinks it saved her life because she's more of a sensitive, artistic type of kid, and she tried public school for a year and a half when we moved, because she was like, well, maybe if I go to public school, I can meet kids in the area and I'll try it and see if I like it. So we were like, well, okay. We feel like she had a good foundation, a good moral basis and stuff. So we thought we can try it. And it was a very small, like rural school. So we didn't think it would be that bad. Her experience in public school was so terrible. Like I said, it only lasted a year and a half. And I just said, that's enough. You're not happy. You're not doing well. You're not thriving. She started to suddenly have like depression symptoms that she had never had. She was getting bullied by people for literally nothing, just honestly being a white kid in the school. And the public school couldn't intervene, wouldn't do anything, and it was just rough. And she was like, I'm not learning anything. I'm not learning anything at all. So we pulled her out. We went back to homeschool, and then she did the culinary arts program at our tech center. Absolutely loved it. Graduated a year early. She's now a pastry chef, and she absolutely loves her job. And she, like my younger ones that are still homeschooled, they asked her the question you asked me. They were like, do you think, number two, that it was good to be homeschooled? Or like, do you wish you would have done more public school? And she said, no, mom pulling me out of public school could have like saved my life, because I think I could have ended up like seriously depressed, and like really things could have gotten really bad if I had stayed. So she's like, nope, super glad I was homeschooled. I was glad to be done a year early and start working. And I absolutely love my job. I love everybody I work with. And it's the kind of thing where she knows she wants to be a mom. So she can be a pastry chef part-time around kids. She can take a 10-year break from doing that, and it's not going to affect, like, you know, it's not like if you're a CEO and you've taken 10 years out of the workforce, now you're at this drastic disadvantage. She's like, this is great, because if I get married, I've got like wifing skills. And then if I want to stay home with my kids and then go back to it when I'm, you know, mom's age now, like in her 40s, she's like, there's no reason I wouldn't be able to do that. So she's super happy with it. The younger ones, they love it. And like I said, they're super social. So they will encounter public school kids all the time, like in gymnastics or at church or on the playground. And they love to tell those kids about homeschool. And it usually starts out with the public school kids going, that's weird. You just stay home. And they're like, yeah, and we do this and we do this, and they explain it. And then by the time they're done telling the other kids how great it is, I've literally had this happen where one of the playground kids went up to their mom and was like, Mom, can we be homeschooled? I want to be homeschooled. And the other mom was just kind of looking at me like, thanks a lot. Because it might have been a situation where she couldn't or didn't want to do that, but we had kind of gotten her kids thinking that homeschooling would be great. So yeah, we do get that. We certainly get that where other people are like, oh, that's kind of strange, or what's that all about? But you just explain it, and usually people are pretty cool about it for the most part.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Yeah. Sorry. We're trying to make pizzas and my little one's telling me to move the door. Sorry. Yes, no, that's really, really good. Okay. No, I think I'm pretty set. Thank you so much, Rose. I really appreciate it and answering all these questions. It's awesome.
You're my first ever caller. You're my first ever call-in on my show. Yeah. So you get to go down in history on my little YouTube channel.
Wow. Yeah. I'm the mama that emailed you from Australia. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you calling in, and good luck with your little ones, and you guys have fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, and to you too. Thank you. Keep it up. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Okay, if anybody else wants to call in, I will drop the StreamYard again. If not, drop a question in the chat. Let me check my Dono chat and see if there's anything else in there. Oh yeah, okay. An anonymous person said that I don't have to read this aloud, so I won't. Yeah, and they just want me to address something on another stream. So I will. It's actually something that I'm probably going to do a stream about another time. So thank you so much for your donation, and I will probably answer that in an upcoming stream because I have some opinions about that. So it's one thing I'm not short on is opinions, unfortunately. Talita said that her sister was homeschooled at 16 because school is horrible and she graduated at 17. Yeah, that's what happens. You can learn in 1 year what takes the public school kids 5 years to learn. That's why I say, like, what I think the biggest mistake I see is that people will start homeschool and they put so much pressure and they're like, we have to be doing it for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. And we have to be like, they just have this conception that there has to be tests and quizzes and worksheets, and that if we're not doing homework, first of all, let's talk about the research on homework. There is no research to support homework as a concept. So doing more school after you leave school, shockingly, doesn't teach you much of anything, right? Why do they have to have homeschool? The reason they have to have homework, the reason they have to do homework is basically they're trying to simulate homeschool. It's basically that they're trying to teach a kid how to learn to do work on their own without a teacher like literally walking through everything. Your kids are already going to get that. They're already going to get that when they are homeschooled. So you don't have to give them homework. Learning doesn't have to be about worksheets and quizzes. Some kids, that's good for them. Some kids like pen to paper. They like doing, problems on a worksheet that's online or whatever. That's fine. If you have kids that love that kind of thing, go for it. But most kids, I would say, tend to learn better from hands-on stuff, from like Pano, my fabulous Greek friend, is in there saying kids can read Aristotle by 15. Yes, they could. And I think that they should. But we do a very Socratic kind of thing where it's just like we're talking all the time. Like basically our home and our way of life is a giant learning environment, if that makes sense. So like my 11-year-old the other day said, Mom, do you think the Virgin Mary would like mac and cheese? And I was like, that's a really interesting question. Like, first of all, probably because who doesn't like mac and cheese, right? But why did you ask me that? And she was like, well, I don't know. And she like went into all of her like reasoning of how she came to this question. It was actually quite interesting. And it was interesting to hear her thought process. And one of the cool things about homeschool is that you really get to know your kids. You like really know them. Not like nights and weekends know them. Not like when you get 5 minutes and you've been at work all day and you're super exhausted and you just don't have the time and energy, but you really get to know them. They're a part of your life. You're a part of their life. And the family dynamic is a part of life, which I think is also really helpful for like relationships. All of my kids are really close. They get along really well, which is amazing to me because my sister and I were like mortal enemies and still don't get along as adults. We did not have a good relationship. We never had a good relationship. So for me to have a house with 5 kids where everybody's like hugging and loving each other and rarely, I mean, like if one of them hits the other, it's like, because it's that rare. It just doesn't happen much. They'll do the usual bickering like, whatever, so and so, that's not what I said. And like, well, you said it with an attitude. Like maybe some of that here and there. But generally, they're best friends. They're super close. They get along great. They support each other. And I really think that a large part of that is just having a true home family dynamic. So that's a big plus. Another big plus that I see from homeschooling, if you look at the typical public school kid's life these days, it's insane to me. It's insane. There are kids that are getting up at 5:30 in the morning so they can catch a bus or get to school. Maybe they have a before school club or thing that they got to do, right? So they're getting up at like 5:36 in the morning. They start school really early, like around here schools start at like 8:45 or something. They're there until 2:30 or 3:30 depending on their age, and then afterwards they usually have like, oh, I have to go do this study group, or I've got this sports team, or I've got this club that I'm in, or I've got this project I have to work on, right? So they're doing a bunch of stuff after school. Then they come home and have dinner, and then they usually have 2 or 3 hours of homework. Like my oldest, who did do a lot of public school, she would have 2 or 3 hours of homework every night. I'm like, how are you in school 7 hours a day and you still need to come home and do school for 2 or 3 hours a night? That's insane. And she'd be up until midnight trying to finish this stuff because if you didn't turn it in, you were going to get points deducted, right? So she's up until midnight, going to bed exhausted, waking up at 6 in the morning to do it all over again. For high school kids and junior high kids to be getting 6 hours of sleep a night is insane. I could like rant all day about this. It's extremely detrimental to their development, to their health, to everything from like sex hormones to how their brain functions, to their circadian rhythm being all out of whack, to them being more likely to be obese, to crave food that's bad for them because they're so sleep deprived. Having a nation of sleep deprived kids, and we wonder why they're all on anxiety meds and have learning disorders and all kinds of crazy diseases, why there's high rates of obesity, because these kids should be sleeping 10 or 11 hours a night. Like if you ask a doctor, they'll say let growing kids, especially teenagers, let them sleep as much as they want. They need it. It's just like when they're toddlers. They need a lot of sleep. And we're putting them in this insane system where they're getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night. And a lot of them are staying up scrolling on their phones until 3 in the morning. They're getting a few hours of sleep and then going to school. And we wonder why they can't control their temper, why they can't pay attention in class. Like to me, this is like a big part of why I homeschool. My kids get a proper amount of sleep. They get the rest that they need, which I think has a huge effect on their behavior. We don't have a lot of behavioral problems in our house, to be perfectly honest. We just don't have like angry, unhinged, lashing out like kids who are having so many problems. And I think a big part of it is they're sleeping really well and they're sleeping enough. The other part is they eat well. I saw the stuff they were feeding them in public school and it was garbage, especially the Michelle Obama school program. Garbage. Absolute crap, right? My kids are eating like real homemade food, real food from whole food sources for the most part. They get treats. I'm not like, oh, you can't have ice cream. No, they can have some ice cream and they're all normal weight. They're all healthy. And the other great thing, when my older ones were in public school, we were sick constantly. We were sick more often than we weren't sick. And now that they're homeschooled, we get sick once or twice a year. The whole house will get something and that's it. It's fine. So I think there's a ton of benefit. I think there's so many upsides to it. The other great thing is you get to decide what's important to your family, right? I love that if we want to stay up a little late one night and play a family game, we can. And if the kids get up at 9:30 instead of 8:30, so that's fine. I've had people say stuff to me like, well, they need to learn how to get up on time and be at a job on time. It's like, none of them have ever had trouble with that. Like the older ones that are adults, like both of them are, they've both gotten raises recently for having like perfect attendance and always being on time and being like really reliable workers. So there's that. Do you have any advice on dealing with a high energy child that is also very bright? Yes, I do. How do you deal with homeschool when you had a newborn at the same time? Great questions. These are the questions I was hoping for. So, yes, I was a high energy, bright kid, and my parents didn't know what to do with that. It was a little bit rough on them because if I didn't get stimulation, like intellectual stimulation, I would get into trouble. My son was like that too. It was like, find something that Rachel's interested in and get her on it, because if we don't, she's going to be like taking things apart or like I would just cause some kind of trouble. I would just get myself into trouble. Nothing like terrible, just like mischievous bored kid stuff, right? So if you have a high energy kid who's bright, find what their things are, right? Find the stuff they're interested in. Maybe they're really good at music. Maybe they're like really good at a sport. Whatever it is, if they're like really physical, let them be physical. Like, don't try to stifle that. Don't try to make them sit in a chair, because they will learn that. They really will. Like, as they grow and develop, it's super normal for kids to be high energy and like bursting with energy and wanting to be really physical. And that is how they learn. There's like a lot of physicality involved in learning. So find physical stuff you can do with them. That's what we did with my son a lot. It was like he loved the gardening projects. He loved anything outside. We had chickens. He would help with the chickens. And, there's like a lot of farmy work to do with that. If you don't have access to that sort of thing, maybe he loves soccer. Get him in a soccer league and like early in the day, get him lots of activity, him or her. Get them a lot of like, let them get their hands on stuff. There's a lot of cool sensory tools that you can get now where there's like sand boxes or like that kinetic sand stuff. If you can set up something like that where when they're going nuts, maybe they can do something cool like that and build things. Maybe they can work with their hands a lot. But let them be physical. Give them lots and lots of breaks. Don't try to sit them at a desk and force them to focus, because that comes with age as they grow. It really does. I promise. When they're little, you think, oh my gosh, like how am I ever going to get this child to sit still and pay attention? But they do. If you let them go through the phase of figuring out their body in space, like figuring out their what that is. Like when you're little, you're figuring out how your body moves and what to do. So like gymnastics would be great for a kid like that, whether they're a boy or a girl. Anything physical, let them do as much physical stuff as you can. Make your learning as physical and as little of the sitting down paperwork stuff as possible and as much of the hands-on stuff as you can. And then if you have a new baby, this is another thing I wish I had had an older mother tell me when I was younger. If you have a newborn, don't feel guilty. Don't worry. If you are stuck with a baby on your boob for half the day or 2/3 of the day, that's okay. There's lots of time. You don't have to feel guilty that like maybe you only did homeschool with your older child 3 times this week. And you might have the tendency to get down on yourself and feel bad. Don't feel bad. The older child's going to be totally fine. Just look for little opportunities to get them to help you. So like if you're busy with the baby, maybe you can say to the older child, hey, can you help mommy with this while I'm taking care of the baby, and make them feel important, make them feel like they're part of taking care of the baby. That was a big thing that helped my older kids. So we didn't have that like, I'm jealous of the baby and want to get rid of the baby thing. We made them feel like really involved in helping take care of the baby. So taking care of the baby wasn't just mom's job. It's like the whole family's job. So I'd say any little way you can find to involve the older kids in taking care of the babies is always good. And it's good learning for them. It's really good. Like that's like actual social emotional learning. Like how does the baby respond when I, give her, when they get a little older, and you can give them a couple Cheerios or something, or you can give them their toy, or you can get their pacifier when they drop it. and like helping take care of the kid, that's a really great thing to do. So just don't put a ton of pressure on yourself that you're not doing enough with your older child because you're taking care of the baby. You've got time. You're going to work it in. You're going to get it in. And that older child is going to pick up way more than you think just by being around you and watching you and being involved. So if you don't get a ton of homework stuff in, it's okay. Just look for little moments to teach and little moments to involve them. They will be fine. Let them be a bit boisterous. Let them be physical. That's all normal and it's perfectly fine. So I feel like one of the best things you can tell moms is just chill, just relax. Don't worry so much. You're going to do fine. Just do your best with all your little moments every day. You're going to be fine and you will figure it out. And it seems when they're all small, like things will never calm down. But one day you're going to find yourself going, wow, I'm sleeping every night and the kids go to bed on time and the whole entire house doesn't always look like a bomb just exploded in it. And things have kind of settled down. I know that when they're babies, it doesn't feel like that, but that day does come. You will get there. So just chill. You'll be fine. But yeah, let there be some chaos. Let there be some insanity. When they're all little like that, it's just one phase of life. It doesn't last forever. Depending on how many you have, it might be just a few years or it might be 15, 16 years like it was for me. But you'll get through it and everyone will be okay. So just do what you can. Do what you can, and that's good enough. All right. We got just a few more minutes here before I'm going to wrap up for today's stream. Don't worry, we're going to do many more homeschool streams because it's going to be like a regular feature of the community and of the channel talking about homeschooling. We're setting up the Discord and making it better so that parents can talk and share resources and hang out and have community and have support with each other, which is another big thing. So maybe just a last minute question or two that we can do before we get done. See, my husband is trolling my chat. I love you. You're handsome. You're going to go on. My husband's going to be on David Patrick Harry's channel at 7. So everybody go check that out. What else? Any other questions? Did I miss any big ones, guys? Did I miss any like really good questions? I haven't been super good about watching the chat because I've been like trained not to look at the chat when I'm streaming too much. How did you teach topics you weren't as familiar with? So yeah, that's what I was talking about when you like actually learn a lot from homeschooling your kids, because I've learned a ton of things that I wasn't so great at. Like I'm not a big math person. I'm pretty good with basic math. Probably better than the old ball and chain in the chat there, but sorry, honey, I'm just throwing shade. We used programs for that. And like I was saying, my son with algebra, like just I would be like, I think that's right, you know, and he'd be like, yeah, it's right, but the program will help you. So if there's something you're really weak at, you don't have to be a professor and an expert in it. Find a good program. There's so many. If you guys go to the description on this broadcast, there is a link to an article I wrote for Gab that has a bunch of homeschooling resources that are great for starting. Check those out. For stuff like math, science, tech, programming, all that kind of stuff, computer stuff, Khan Academy is really good. I like a lot of eclectic sources, so that's why I listed them there. But also Ask Moon, she's always in the chat. She's done a bunch of Charlotte Mason stuff. She does a lot of just book reading, I think, with her kids and stuff like that. So if there's something you're particularly weak in, the options are find a really good program. Another great option, there's a lot of tutors who will just do like an a la carte thing. So maybe you have a child that wants to learn guitar and you have no idea about music. You can get a virtual guitar tutor, or you can do an online guitar class or something like that. So if there are certain things that you don't know that you want to teach your child, maybe look into like a tutoring program or something if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, there's tons of great free programs, or a homeschool co-op would be another really good option. So in a co-op, it usually is like you'll have a group, everybody gets to know each other and trust each other pretty well. And then you have meetups throughout the different weeks where maybe one mom is like the math teacher mom who's really good at that, and then another teacher who's like an English lit professor or something, right? And she does a lot of literature stuff with them. So if you join a co-op where you have a weakness, you can have your kids do some co-op stuff where those people have a strength that you don't, and vice versa. So those are a great option too. Let's see. What age did you start homeschooling? So my younger ones, pretty much right from the get. We did a little bit of preschool stuff with number 4, but it didn't last long. It was just better to do it at home for her. The older ones, it wasn't until my oldest one did basically none, because by the time I started homeschooling, she was getting ready to go into 9th grade and do the vocational school stuff. Number 2 was, she was 4th grade, and then my son was 2nd grade. So those are the ages that we started at. And then, yeah. So, okay. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you for calling in. Thank you for your questions. Thank you so much for your donations. If you still want to make a donation, you can always do that even when I'm not streaming in the Dono chat link, which is in the description. And it's also pinned to the top of the chat. If you guys do send me a Dono chat, like you're watching this later tonight, I will read it the next time I stream and answer your question then if you want to do that. So thank you so much, all of you guys, for your support. This is a brand new channel. We're already like doing really great, and it's exceeded my expectations. So I really appreciate every single one of you that follows my goofy work that I do. And thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week.